Hello and welcome to Dawn Chorus Writes, a Miraculous Ladybug fanfiction and audio fiction. This is the special series, AU series for the 7 stages of life for Adrienette April. So we are on currently stage 4. I hope you're enjoying it so far. Massive shout out to J. Carroll for her commissioned artwork, which is absolutely beautiful and stunning. Go and send her loads of love. All her information is down below. This is also a collaboration piece with Shika, so make sure you send her some love. All her information is down below, and make sure you send me some love by smashing that like button. Comment down below what you think of it and what will happen in stage 5, and make sure you subscribe so you do not miss out on future stages and series and one-shots to come. And I hope you enjoy. Stage 4, Fairy Lights. Marinette, 21 years old, is attempting to be the best designer, starts her own fashion house, and is madly in love with Adrien. Twist, loop, twist, turn, loop. Marinette blinked exhaustion from her eyes as she tried to focus on the black silken strands woven around her hand. The bright white light from her work lamp caused her head to ache, whilst the reflections of the metal shuttle in her hand created bright spots which danced across her vision. But she had to get this done. Her final showcase was in 2 weeks, and this lace jacket was the finishing touch to her statement dress. Her dressmaker's mannequin was gowned in the pale pink silk dress, highlighted with jet beadwork and ruffled black tulle petticoat, but the lace jacket was the crowning touch. Everything had to be perfect if she was going to impress the potential investors who would be present at the graduate showcase. Of course, I could just accept Mr. Aggress's offer to work for the Aggress fashion house, but I want to prove myself first, prove that I can bring more than just enthusiasm to the business. She and Adrien had talked it through, that she had to follow her gut, and he was proud of her for wanting to stand on her own feet, and not to feel intimidated by his father. Now that she and her kitty had been together for 4 years, a mutual understanding had formed between Gabriel and herself, whereas Adrien's mother Emily was warmer and embraced her into the family. And yet there was a part of her which second-guessed herself and worried that she made the wrong decision, casting a shadow over everything she did, making her nervous and jittery. Or maybe that was just the caffeine. The stack of empty mugs to go cups littering the sides of the workstation made a definite possibility. Twist, loop, twist, turn, loop. Twist, loop, turn, snap. Oh, not again, she exclaimed, throwing her shuttle down with excessive force before slamming her forehead into her hands in frustration. Strong arms wrapped around her from behind and a warm kiss pressed against her temple. "Maybe you need a break, Daisy," Adrien murmured into her ear before spinning her round to face him. His fingers continued to gently rub her temples and pulling out strands from her messy bun. But it felt good to have his calming touch. "You've been at this for 4 hours, and that is what, the 3rd time you've broken your thread? You're too tense and tired." He leaned forward and kissed her forehead. She sighed. "I know, but everything needs to be perfect, and the showcase is fast approaching." He let out a soft chuckle at the pouting, grumpy expression on her face. "It is in 2 weeks, and you will work better with a break, or better yet, some sleep." One of his hands stroked down her cheek as she closed her eyes. He was right. Of course he was right. He knew her better, sometimes more than she did. She felt the light tingle of his lips brushing against hers, breathing life back into her. Flicking her eyes open, she brushed the fringe from his face and grinned at how his green eyes sparkled like frosted dew on spring grass. "Oh, you may be right, Kitty." He raised his eyebrows at her, his nose brushing against hers as he tilted his head slightly to the side. She couldn't help a playful smile in return. "Care to take your own advice there, Dr. Aggress? Those bags under your eyes are big enough for Alia at the farmer's market." Which was seriously crazy ever since she started a food blog with her mom on. He chuckled and leaned down to kiss her lightly on the lips. 1, they aren't that big, and 2, I'm nowhere near being a doctor yet, he said, waving a hand at the pile of textbooks and class notes in the study space he had set up in the opposite side of her living room work area. But I guess I need a break too. These chemical formulas are all starting to look the same. She groaned. Don't talk science to me right now. My head hurts enough as it is. That's why I stick to fabric. And why it sticks to you? He replied with a grin, picking black threads off her pink jumper. She sighed. Sometimes I wonder if I'm really cut out for this, Kitty. She dropped her gaze from his eyes and played with a button on her workstation. He encouraged her to look at him. Of course you are, Marinette. Everything you make is so beautiful. Puns, really? She released a mixture of eye roll, giggle, and pursed lips. I couldn't resist. It was right there. Plus, you've loved my puns since we were 9 years old. He placed a tiny kiss on the end of her nose, and she pushed him back by his. This shows that taste improves with age. He pouted at her rebuff, but she couldn't stand to see him looking sad even for a moment. She ran her fingers along the collar of his denim shirt, pulling him in closer. Kitty, of course I love your puns, silly. It's just, my mind is going so fast and my hands can't keep up. I fear that my designs are probably too simple to impress anyone. I mean, what am I bringing new to the table? Or, using your father's words, what am I trying to say? They both laughed at her bad impression of his father. I'm worried about being able to handle it all. If I am this stressed now, when I only have 3 designs to show, how am I gonna manage my own business? I barely sleep now. I'm doing your pre-med studies and the showcase, and the only way we've had time together in months is if we study together, and then that isn't exactly meaningful time. She pulled on the strands of hair that had fallen out of her bun, frustration, anxiety, and worry spiraling into a dark whirlpool in her head. Adrien pulled her up out of her chair and into her arms, hugging her tightly. Okay, breathe with me, Marinette. In, hold, and let it go. Good. Now do it again. He wrapped her up into a ball of comfort and safety. Slowly she breathed in his scent of rosemary and lavender, helping to focus her tangled thoughts as she leaned against his chest, listening to the rhythmic sound of his steady heartbeat. She wrapped one arm around his waist whilst the other played with a button on his shirt, sensing the tension ease. Adrien had always been there for her. He was her rock, her tether, her comfort, and her peace. And yet, with how busy they'd become of late, and it was only a glimmer of what was to come, she felt like they stood on a precipice, and the slight breeze would send them falling away from each other forever. But she would never let that happen. She would fight to the ends of the earth for this man. He was her world. Adrien stroked back her hair and lifted her chin, brushing a light kiss on her lips. Come on, Daisy. Let's go up to the clubhouse and get some fresh air. We could both use it. His voice was tired, but full of tenderness and support, as it always was for her. Marinette should probably let him go home and rest. He had an early class in the morning. But the thought of parting just yet seemed too cruel to bestow upon their hearts. She needed him close to her, and hated it when he had to leave. She looked up at his face, her fingers sketched along his features, imprinting every tiny detail about him. The way his hair fell around his face, the strong angle of his jaw, the way his brilliant green eyes shone down on her with so much love it made her throat tighten. I love you, Adrien, she said with a sigh that was bursting with love as the threat of tears forced her to take a deep breath back, shaking her head. I'll go and get the keys. She went to shuffle out of his hold, but he wouldn't let her. Instead, he cupped her face and gazed into her eyes with such intensity that she almost had to look away. I love you, a field full of daisies, Marinette, he said before leaning down and kissed her, pouring all of his emotions he was feeling into that moment. Wow, That's a lot of daisies. She grinned like a Cheshire cat, and she moved to pick up her keys, rubbing her thumb across the Miraculous Clubhouse logo as a keychain. They held hands on the way up to the access stairs to the rooftop terrace. A key aspect of her and Alia grabbing this loft apartment, which on the inside had seen better days. Come on, girl, just picture it. Bedroom here, living room there, Alia had said. What it lacks in privacy, it makes up for in space. For your designs, workshop space, and the rooftop means you don't have to lose your balcony. She was right, of course. She flipped the switch on the way out, turning on not just the utility lights, but the hundreds of fairy lights they had strung around and over the space, creating a magical golden glow. It had become their new, improved Miraculous Clubhouse. Nino and Adrien had attempted to build some sort of covered seating area, which had 2 large sofas they had gotten from a flea market positioned underneath. And them attempting to bring up the stairs was priceless, especially when Adrien decided to reenact the scene from Friends and began to shout the word pivot, pivot, until Alia literally screamed enough, and Marinette was doubled over laughing, clutching her stomach. On the adjoining walls, they had created the cave, but instead of animals, they had filled it with what the 4 of them loved and their dreams for the future, whilst in the centre were 4 handprints. The rest of the space was covered in flowers, especially tall daisies, or as she liked to call them, lots of happy promises, which looked like dancing glowing fireflies with the fairy lights weaving between them at night. A light breeze felt good against her face as Adrien stood behind her and wrapped his arms around her middle, nuzzling his face between her neck and the softness of her jumper, his breath tickling against her skin. He pressed a soft kiss at the spot before rubbing his face upwards. There is nothing like some fresh nighttime air and a cuddle with the woman I love to refresh me, he murmured into her ear. Marinette leaned more firmly against him, clutching his hands around her tightly, desperately. It isn't just a showcase that is bothering you. Tell me what it is so I can help, Marinette. It's just a bit of silliness, really. My mind wandering where it really shouldn't go, she breathed out. He turned her in his arms, but allowed her to keep her gaze down, now staring at his chest and continuing to fiddle with the button. Daisy, my Daisy, because you are the most important promise to me, and I was going to say there was nothing you could say that was silly. Her eyes darted up to his, and he was waiting for them as he did his usual eyebrow wiggle dance, which never failed to make her smile. In all seriousness, I know you, probably better than you know yourself, and when you are like this, it's not something silly. We can tell each other anything. We are the best friends as well as the love of my life. So tell me, what has gotten you all tangled up? She pressed her face against his chest, muffling her voice, and smelt the spilt coffee on his t-shirt. I got a thought inside my head, and I ended up Googling it. I know I shouldn't, but I came across an article that says 50% of relationships fall apart when one person is in medical school, which is bad enough, but then this fashion is just as time-consuming and cutthroat. She pressed her face harder against him, the tears absorbing straight into the fabric of his t-shirt as the pounding of his heart quickened. What if we end up drifting apart from each other? She felt his arms tighten protectively around her as he pressed a kiss to the top of her head, lingering there for a while, breathing her in, and she felt a few droplets soak into her scalp. The love of my life. That is never going to happen. We are fated together, you and I. From the moment I first met you on the porch of the cabin, I knew you were special and felt like a bond unlike I've ever known before, or since with anyone else. You're not just part of my life, you are my life, Marinette. She moved a fraction as he lifted his head back. She leaned back enough to watch the fairy lights dance in his eyes, knowing hers were red and puffy. He rubbed his thumb under one of her eyes, not realizing the tears were still flowing. You, he kissed the spot where his thumb was. You were my first true best friend. You are my love. You slot inside my heart as if you were always meant to be there. Without you, I'm not whole, and I can't imagine anything that would tear us apart. No matter how busy life gets in our next stage of life, there will always be time for you, Daisy. She was emotionally overwhelmed by his words and the amount of love which poured out of her heart. She had no words. She had no breath as her hammering heart had pushed it out of her lungs. Her arms wrapped around his neck and she kissed him fiercely as the tears streamed down her cheeks and pulled at the lips. After a while they paused, and she could see the blush which had formed across his cheeks. Adrien, your words... She tugged at her bottom lip between her teeth, attempting to stop any more tears from descending. You are my sunshine, and my world revolves around you. But I guess I was fearing that someday you would have to choose between me and your dreams. I mean, you already have with Oxford, passing on such an opportunity for me. I'm not giving up my dream of being a doctor. It's a place of study, and Paris University has a great postgraduate course, and it means remaining here with you. He smiled, stroking his hand down her upper arm. She rolled her eyes. What I'm trying to say, you deserve the world, Adrien, and I want to give that to you, but how can I when I'm distracted by my own deadlines and my own projects, and we only get to see each other when we force ourselves to make time for one another? I love you so much, but I'm scared to what that will mean for us. I get that. I do. And having this fear is natural, my love. Especially when we are about to face another change, he said, stroking back her hair. But what will never change is my love for you. He softly ran his fingers along her jaw as she nodded her head in confirmation at his words. And I know we have both been under a lot of stress the last few months, which tends to make things a little bleaker than they really are. However, trust me, trust our love, that nothing will change how much I love you. Medical school can't change that. Starting your own fashion house with Tiki can't change it. You'll always be my Marinette, my Daisy. The girl who stole my heart at the age of 9 with smiles, hugs, and daisy promises. He let out a long breath. I would never have to choose between you and my dreams, Marinette. You are my dream. You always have been. Adrien lifted her chin and kissed her softly, devoutly, as if he was pouring everything they were and could be into it. Her heart pounded loudly, drowning out the worry and the unknown. Her hands crept up to the tangle in his hair, pulling him in, wanting more of his kiss. The world and all of its distractions fell away, and they parted only when both were dizzy and breathless. The love in his eyes was overwhelming as he sparkled with dancing fairy lights. Adrien, the way you have with words leaves me speechless, thinking how mine could compare to yours. He was about to talk, protest, but instead she placed a finger to his lips. There is still a part of me believing my life with you is all but a dream, created by my younger self, and one day I will wake and you'll be gone, leaving behind a shattered heart, for how could it mend if you are not there holding it together? So that fear lingers in the back of my mind, waiting for the moment. But after your words, your amazing, wonderful words, I refuse to acknowledge that fear anymore. And if this is all but a dream, then let me say this. She inhaled deeply, locking onto his eyes. Adrienette, my kitty, my sunshine, the love of my life. Will you marry me? Those green eyes opened wide in surprise. What? Marry me! That's the exhaustion talking. he chuckled, pressing another kiss to her lips, but she wouldn't let herself be distracted. Nope, just me. I mean it. Marry me, Adrien. He stared at her in shock, his cheeks burning pink in the golden glow. You really mean it? Yeah, I really do. Because I want to spend every minute of every hour with you. I want to embrace the next stage of our lives together. You are my everything. You are not part of my heart. You are my heart. And it has always been us, you and me, against the world, fighting against anything that might try to pull us apart, knowing that they will fail. So what do you say, my kitty, my partner, my Adrien? Marry me? He stared at her with a dazed, lovesick expression on his face before he chuckled once more. What? No ring? It's not official without a ring, you know. Oh, she stared down at her bare hands. I didn't think this through, did I? She stood at the rooftop, hoping something would jump out at her, before her eyes landed on the daisies and chuckled to herself. She plucked one and held it out to him. How about a daisy promise instead? To love you forever, to stand by your side no matter what. He took the flower just as he had so long ago, and his smile was so wide and sweet that it took her breath away. How could I say no to that? She clasped her hands to the side of his face, standing on her tippy toes. You mean it? You want to marry me? I do. Her lips crashed against his, the tempo slowed to become soft and tender. You totally stole my moment, you know, he murmured in her ear. What do you mean? He pulled a small box out of his pocket and held it out to her. Inside was a ring. In the center had a round yellow diamond, while spanning around it were tear-shaped clear diamonds, which looked like petals nestled amongst enamel green leaves and set on white gold band. She gasped, a hand going to her mouth in surprise. Daisy promise? He chuckled, taking hold of her left hand and sliding the ring onto her finger. I got it made using one of my grandmother's pieces, he said, his voice filled with so much love she felt her heart would burst. I happened to pick it up from the jeweler's this afternoon. I was going to wait until after the showcase. I even had this whole special date planned, romantic music, candlelight, dinner, dancing and roses. I wanted to sweep you off your feet, drown you in romance, and get down on one knee and beg you to make me the happiest man on earth. But you know what? What? I wouldn't change a thing. He leaned down and kissed her, long, slow, and sweet. She had to cling to him to stay upright. I love you so much, Marinette. I love you too, Adrien, she whispered, clasping his hands in hers. She couldn't help but add coyly, That date does sound wonderful, though. There's no need to change all your plans, is there? He chuckled. As you wish, Daisy. It suddenly hit her exactly what had happened, and she blushed furiously. I just asked you to marry me, didn't I? Yep, practically demanded it, actually. It's not a dream. He grinned down at her, eyes shining, and his hands around her waist, pulled her against him possessively. If it is, then I don't want to wake up. She giggled as her cheeks burned. Then it is as you wish, future Dr. Agress. As you wish, future Mrs. Agress, he resorted, rubbing his nose against hers. Mrs. Dupang Chang Agress, you mean? She declared proudly. Oh, really? That's quite a mouthful. You could always take my name. Possibly, but I think Father would have a fit. I think he's secretly hoping to pass the torch to you in time, and would like to keep the name in the family. Think I could persuade him to change his mind? The house of Dupang Chang Agress would be very memorable. You can try. He has a great deal of respect for you, and my mother adores you. She smirked back, knowing it always made his heart race. Then maybe I should start with you. They say the younger generation is more open to compromise. I don't know. I'm used to getting whatever I want. I'm absolute. She pulled him down into a kiss before he could finish what she was sure was going to be a pun. When she let him go, he swayed on his feet and whispered, "Putty in your hands?" "That's what I thought, Kitty," she breathed onto his lips. They suddenly both yawned at the same time, ending with grinning goofily at each other. "Time for bed," Adrian said gently, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. They walked back down to the loft, Adrian humming "Daisy, Daisy" under his breath until she tickled him to make him stop. "That song sounds like the couple are gonna end up poor or something, and that is not likely in your case, Mr. Trust Fund Baby. Even if I wasn't well off, I would still take on the world for you, Marinette," he said as he gathered up his study materials. "That, and your parents would never let us starve." She giggled sleepily. "Not the way my mum tries to stuff you whenever we visit," she replied between yawns. Slinging his bag over his shoulder, he gathered her into one last hug and kissed her on the forehead. "Good night, Marinette, my future wife." She snuggled against him one last time, breathing in the scent of coffee, rosemary, and lavender. The smell of home. Thank you for listening to stage 4, Fairy Lights of the 7 stages of life. I hope you enjoyed it. Make sure you smash that like button. Comment down below what you think of it and what will happen in stage 5 of Adrien and Marinette's life together, which will be coming out tomorrow. So make sure you subscribe, hit those notification bells, and make sure you look out for the next installment. And I hope you are good, and I will speak to you soon. Bye.